The second non-fiction book I have recently read is called The Fact of a Body, A Murder and a Memoir. What a great name. By Alexandria Marzano-Lesnevich. Now, I saw this on Russell's channel. What's new? I know I'm not going to go on about how awesome Russell is, because I always do. But I saw this on his channel, and I've seen it on a few channels since. And I'm so glad I did, because it was great to read. This is super interesting. It is just what it says on the tin, a murder and a memoir. It tells the story of the author, Alexandria, who is a writer, but also is a law student. And she considers herself 100% staunchly against the death penalty. And one day as a law student, she comes across the case of this man named Ricky Langley, who is a convicted paedophile on death row, accused of murder and also of paedophilic crimes. And she doesn't understand herself when she comes across this case, because despite being 100% staunchly morally opposed to the death penalty, she finds herself wanting this man to die. And so this gives way to the story that we are entered into as the reader. Why is it that despite her moral convictions, she is so affected by what this man has done that she wants him to die? It becomes clear very early on in the book that as a child she was subject to the abuse from a family member that has been triggered by her study of this case. And so what we end up with in this book as readers is the sort of expert, in my opinion, braiding of two genres. So we have a kind of delving, which seems almost accidental, much like a trigger is, I guess, into her past and into the secrets that have existed for years in her family and that have been passed down through generations, and this kind of cancer that the secret has turned into, that has grown and blackened and festered within her family. And this book is kind of the area and the space in which she delves into that. And that is obviously, like I said, braided, linked into her exploration of this man, Ricky Langley, and the crime he committed, and the author's kind of quest to stay impartial and to understand the value of looking at this case as a law student and not as a human being who has been through everything that she's been through. Now, personally, I think the memoir bit of this book is absolutely astounding. First of all, Alexandria is an amazing writer. Her choice of vocabulary is incredible. She is economical in her word choice, but it's always absolutely beautiful and completely heartbreaking and incredibly raw. So by the way, if any of these topics are sensitive to you, I would be very careful before picking this up. But it feels a privilege to be let into something that must have been so hard to explore, and something that was, like I say, a secret for so long. And then the kind of Ricky Langley murder, more mysterious side is slightly less well executed, in my opinion. But I did say it was an expert braiding of two genres, because I do think, to me, they didn't feel very separate, and that was the strength of this book, because at least my feeling was that was what it was trying to do, kind of sit between these two genres whilst not having a huge separation between them. And in that it succeeds, I think. I was just more interested in her story and kind of her processing of that, and how she was going to get through that, and how she understood what she had been through as a child, now as an adult. So, I mean, that could have just been personal preference. But truly, she's a really great writer, and I cried a lot, and it was very hard to read, and yeah, it's not for the faint of heart, but if you're interested in that kind of true crime memoir stuff, it's almost quite podcasty, and I don't mean to say that it's not literary, because it really is, but that feeling of getting let into a private story, of someone opening a door and saying, here, come in, pull up a chair, I'll tell you my story, which is what leads me to a lot of podcasts and a lot of storytelling podcasts in particular. That was kind of the feeling I got reading this. So if that sounds good to you, then this would probably be up your street. Yeah, does a pretty damn good job. And the last book I have to tell you about tonight, and I have read so many more books since then, but I just have to control myself and not tell you about all the books in one video. But this last one for today is called Here Comes the Sun by Nicole Dennis-Benn. I read this ages ago and realized I haven't wrapped it up. I buddy read it with Russell, so if you want to see his review, I will link it down below. We both really liked it. I think him slightly more than me, but I will tell you what the story that it tells. So we follow two sisters, Margot and Tandy, and Margot works for a hotel in a fictional village in Montego Bay in Jamaica, and she's working two jobs at the hotel, one as a kind of receptionist person, and the second rather more under the table job, providing sexual favors to clients in the hotel to make more money. And this is largely because she wants to help as much as she can to send her sister Tandy to school. Tandy is highly academic and does very well in class, and they really want her to go off and be a doctor and do the family proud. Both sisters live under the roof of their mother, Dolores, who sells things kind of on like a little stall by the side of the road, and has struggled for a long time to make ends meet, and has kind of put all her hopes in her daughter Tandy to become a doctor and really help the family to kind of break out of the cycle of poverty in which they've been existing for a long time. So I'm interested in this book on many levels. A, it happens in Jamaica. If you didn't know about me, I am a quarter Jamaican. I'm interested, obviously, always in finding out more about Jamaica as a country, even if that's through fiction. One of the things that I found particularly wonderful about this book is that most all the dialogue is written in Jamaican patois. And I think not only is this authentic, obviously, because Nicole Dennis-Benn, the author herself, is from Jamaica, and so it lends the story and the atmosphere a level of authenticity which wouldn't have been there if it hadn't been written in patois. But also I think it's a very considered decision, because it kind of gives the book a rhythm which again otherwise wouldn't have been there. So I loved it. I know some people find it a little bit complicated to get into, but I think the trick with that is to read it aloud, and soon you just get right into it, and it's very beautiful. Another thing which I thought was very interesting to explore, especially in the kind of framework of the book as happening in Jamaica, was that Margot finds herself in the course of the book falling in love with a woman. Now, as you may or may not know, Jamaica is still a fairly homophobic country, especially in some circles. And so there's kind of a lot of tension associated with that, and that is part of the thematic appeal of the book to me, is that it explores issues of homophobia, issues of sexism, of course issues of racism. Tandy is really trying to fight back against her family's wishes to become a doctor and kind of break out of the Jamaican lifestyle. She doesn't want to become a doctor. One thing that she is really focused on is becoming prettier, and one of the ways that she tries to do this is to lighten her skin. So the book has a lot to say about kind of racial aspects to beauty and the frankly dangerous practice of skin lightening and the cultural connotations of that. As a whole, I think the book is largely about the kind of cycle of exploitation that being stuck in that kind of life can lead to, and how it repeats itself over and over again, and how these strong female characters really work to try and get themselves out of that. You have Tandy, like I said, who's kind of like a vessel for all the hopes and dreams that her family have always had. You have Margot, who is hiding aspects of herself, most notably her relationship with this woman, which is, by the way, one of the most heartbreakingly beautiful aspects of the book. The kind of exploration of her relationship with this woman and the fire that they come under for being in this relationship. And it tries to do a lot, this book, and it's very well constructed, and it manages to speak to those themes in a very true voice. You can tell that Nicole Dennis-Benn is writing about her own country, that she really wants to let the reader know that underneath of all these beautiful beaches of white sand and sparkling sea that we might have been lucky enough to visit, there is darkness, and there is a cycle of, like I say, exploitation that goes on, and that the tourism industry is not everything that it seems. That in order to give us, and I say us as the big white people, our luxury and our holidays, people have to work hard, and often in ways that they don't want to work, and that goes deep. And in that sense, I think this is a brave book, because it manages to say things about Jamaica and about these countries that rely on the tourism industry that people don't necessarily want to hear. It's easy to just lie on your beach and ignore all of those things, but I think they do need to be talked about. Obviously, LGBT themes in books that are set in largely homophobic countries are always important, and Nicole Dennis-Benn, being married herself to a woman, has experienced a lot of this firsthand, and I appreciate that own voice perspective. The place where this book lost me is the end, where before I thought it was well constructed throughout. For the first 3/4, I felt like the reveals were well timed, and then I felt towards the end that it kind of unraveled really quickly. It was almost as if she was rushing to finish, and I just kind of, it lost me. It lost a little bit of its believability, which is what I was really appreciating at first, the authenticity of the voices within it, the kind of three-dimensionality of all these characters, and how they each had different motivations, and they're three women who are all very strong and very different, and the kind of intergenerational struggles and everything. I just found it all very real, and I could buy it all. And then towards the end, that was no longer really the case, so I thought that was a bit of a shame. I don't think it needed to be any longer, but I don't know, just the way that it was ended needed to be tightened, I guess. But other than that, I think it's not at all what I thought it was going to be. It's called Here Comes the Sun. It has this like super bright cover, and it's a very, very dark book, and makes you sit with some themes that are uncomfortable. And if I ever have the privilege of visiting Jamaica again as a tourist, I will definitely be thinking about this book and the kind of implications it has on how you experience being a tourist in those kinds of places, and you know, the veneer of that world versus what's actually there. And that brings us to the end of this wrap up from bed. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if any of you decide to do bed wrap ups, give me a shout, and maybe, who knows, we can make it a thing. It can be like the next booktube thing, especially for us chronically ill or disabled people. I think it's good. Amy said to me when I tweeted about whether this would be appropriate, she said that she had considered doing bed wrap-ups more than once. So you know what? Here's me giving you permission and telling you to not be embarrassed. I, for one, am super comfy. I hope that I managed to make a little bit of sense, and I hope that some of these books seem appealing to you, and I will be back super soon. I think we're the 6 things, actually. I think we're going to talk about some short books, and we're going to talk about some podcasts, and we're going to talk about some documentaries, and then we'll talk about more books that I'm reading right now, because I'm continuing to read voraciously. In the meantime, I hope that you enjoy your beginnings of autumn. I love you all, and keep reading. Bye.